The reason people cheat, 90-10 split. So our 10% is people cheat because they actually have pre-existing issues, sex addiction, and usually that may intertwine with narcissistic personality disorder. 90% of people cheat because they're in relationships where there's unmet needs and the subconscious mind is a needs-meeting machine. My DA boyfriend is using porn a lot and our sex life has changed. It feels hurtful. It feels like cheating.
They use porn as like escapism. It is an opportunity to sort of step into like a fantasy world, and it's just pure like enjoying themselves and pure pleasure.
Her name is Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
I hope I pronounce her name properly. Thais Gibson.
I am so excited for you to be here with me today. Thank you for joining us. Welcome back to another episode of Can This Be Fixed? I am Thais Gibson, and this is our phenomenal co-host, Mike DiZio. And if you are new to stumbling upon this podcast, then what you'll come to learn is that in these videos, we share from our perspectives of having been a fearful avoidant in the past, done the work to become secure, and a dismissive avoidant who's done the work to become secure. And we talk about, answering your questions that you share on the Reddit thread, Can This Be Fixed? And sometimes we'll pull as well from like YouTube comments, anything that really strikes us as being something that a lot of people are asking about. So in today's episode, we're going to share a little bit about what it feels like to live together with somebody and what the fears tend to be prior to making the leap to actually live with somebody. For fearful avoidance and dismissive avoidance. And then we're going to dive into some really powerful questions that we see come up all the time. One from Gabby Vargas that says, what goes through the mind of dismissive avoidance and fearful avoidance when cheating? And why do they do it or think of doing it? We'll share a whole bunch about that topic specifically. And another question that says, my DA boyfriend is using porn a lot. I found a lot of videos, etc. in laptop history, and our sex life has changed. It feels hurtful. It feels like cheating. So we're going to dive into these really powerful topics today to hopefully bring you some insight, understanding, and awareness in terms of, can you fix this problem in front of you? And just share some insider information about how we can really move the needle on some of these potential relational problems. So we will kick it off. Mike, if you want to start by just sharing a little bit about, when you were a dismissive avoidant, what you experienced when somebody were saying, hey, let's live together. Why don't we sort of take that next leap and make that bigger commitment? What fears would come up for you when moving in that direction? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about some advice or insight you may have for somebody in that situation who may be an avoidant or the partner of one.
Yeah, I remember like definitely when I was at the height of my DA-ness, if someone would like suggest that or that was something they would talk about, I'd kind of be like, yeah, sure. Like that, maybe in the future or whatever. But in my head, I was like, there's no way I think this would be a good idea. Like I really enjoyed when we would hang out, spend time together, do stuff together, all that stuff. But then, let's say it's over the course of a weekend. But then by the end of the weekend, I'm pretty like stoked that they're like going home and going back to their place. And then I'm alone back at my place just to get back to myself. So there was just always this perception of if I had someone move in or if we lived together, like all of my autonomy, all of my independence, all of my sort of downtime and recovery time that is much needed would just be taken away. And yeah, I was just like, there's no way like this would not be an option. And I might sort of humor them, be like, oh yeah, maybe one day. But in my mind, I was like, I don't think ideal. Like, I think this is way better if we just date and have our separate residences and then, come together when we like, and then go home at the end of the night or the end of the weekend.
Can you expand on something where you said, you said I would, if somebody was with me from like Friday through Sunday, and then they're leaving at the end of the weekend, I would be so excited because I know I would get back to myself. Can you just explain that? Because I think that that is such an important thing for people to understand who may be taking it personally or feeling hurt that somebody seems to be retreating. But I think there's some really important reasons for why. So what do you mean get back to yourself for listeners?
Yeah, no, that's a great question for anyone who might be like, what does that even mean? So like, I guess for DAs are just, they have this, low level fight or flight going on. So there's always a little bit of like underlying anxiety and like not feeling like everything's good. So when you're having to deal with someone else who's also there, that's kind of like double like the energy sort of output. So usually the DA would be focused on themselves and like kind of trying to keep their head above water and just making sure everything's okay in their life and trying to eliminate as much stress as possible. But then when you add on somebody else who's in your space and with you the whole time, that sort of adds to another layer of, somebody else you have to sort of worry about and make sure that they're okay, they're having an okay time. So it feels like almost when they leave is when you sort of kind of like breathe, and like, not that they're like smothering you or doing anything like terrible, but it's just your to go back to yourself, and also your time to kind of like turn your mind off. So you might do things like, binge watch shows or play video games or do things that sort of just kind of takes your mind off of everything. So to me, yeah, when you're with someone, like I said, it's like you're having to worry about yourself and then worry about someone else. And it's just hard to, manage the both. Like it feels like a double sort of energy drain. So that when they leave, you get to sort of repower the, in video games where you have the power bar, you sort of get to repower that fire back up. It's almost, I'll give one other example too. It's almost like, I'm more of an introvert, and I think a lot of DAs might fall more on the introversion scale. So when you're outwardly focused and somebody's in your space, it's like slowly taking your energy. DAs, introverts kind of have energy drained when they're socializing with other people. And then when they're back with themselves, that's when they sort of gain their energy back, because they're sort of paying attention to themselves again. And, everything's all about them and doing things that make them feel more energized. So for me, I think I can best equate it to more like almost like introversion, extroversion, where being with someone is more of an energy take, and then being by yourself is where you really revert. So
Yeah, I want to add to that quickly. I think like because we can have dismissive avoidance, there's definitely a trend towards DAs being introverts, but there are definitely some like very social extroverted DAs who are the types of people that you would see, the life of a party and running around from person to person and like a social butterfly, but never really connecting too deeply with people, kind of like keeping everybody at arm's length. And I think even in their types of situations, because I've had lots of like client conversations over the past like 12, however many years now. And I would hear in those types of situations, people saying, yeah, like I just felt like as much as I like to be around people, or as much as I, need that time to be around people, eventually I just feel like I need space from the person I'm in a relationship with. And I think you were touching on this earlier, but one of the biggest underlying factors is that dismissive avoidants don't know how to co-regulate. Like if you don't know how to let somebody in enough where you feel comfortable fully being yourself because you're carrying like some internal shame wounds, and you fear like I can't really let myself be seen if I want to just kick back and watch television and leave my pants off, whatever it is, like they're often afraid to be seen in their vulnerability or in their full openness of who they are. And so I think that's actually a big part of that background, exhaustion, where it's like, I don't want to let people be in my space for too long because I can't truly be myself. Okay, I need that person to go away so I can just go back to being myself again. And so it's such a great analogy you use, because it's almost like that power up again to go back to just your truth. But yeah, I just think that's such an important part to share about. So when people are, hearing that, they're not taking it personally. So anyways, go back to for just a second, the living together. So you would sort of fear living together because you would fear losing those things, or like, how am I going to be in that space fully with somebody all the time? And how would you react to you? Because I think you had times where you did live with people that you were dating. I think quite a few, at least a couple times. And what would that feel like for you as an avoidant at the time, beginning stage, and then as sort of time progressed?
You know what, if the other person was a little more avoidant as well, that would actually work out pretty good, because also they needed their space as well. So it's kind of that whole situation of, you can be in the same space and like maybe I'm on my phone or doing whatever, and they're doing something in the other room. So it was kind of nice, like being able to interact, but not having to interact the whole time. But then if it's somebody who's a little more anxious, they want a little more attention and a little more like, hey, like, I'm here, like pay attention to me. So that would be a little more challenging because, there's only so much give that I had before. So I would try to give as much as I can, and then even sometimes go over. But then I can start to feel the resistance where I'm like, I need space. Like I need to go outside or go to the gym. Like I need a bit of that separation to then come back again and have the energy to spend time with them again. But just to touch on like what you said before, like how DAs are sort of self-conscious and trying to cover up wounds and whatnot. Once they do get to the point where they are kind of more vulnerable and opening and feeling really accepted by this other person, then the energy drain goes away quite a bit. Because like you said, like, we could feel very judged and like not fully, okay with ourselves and thinking our partner will be fully okay with us. But once we do hit that point where we see that like, wow, this person really like accepts me for who I am. And, even though I'm messy and even though I do some stupid stuff, like they really love me because of that. That right there helps so much. Like, cause then you're like, just enjoying yourself and not really having that background self-consciousness and worry about the other person. But again, you should also be doing work on your own core wounds. Like if you feel like you're always nervous around someone, you have to ask yourself, like, what am I so worried about? Like what is the underlying core wound that makes me worried and nervous and, concerned that this person's not going to like me? So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like the other person through time will start to, love and accept you for who you are, but you have to do that yourself. Like you have to set the tone for that yourself too. So
I think that's so well said. And I think that it really points to because it's funny, right? You could make the argument that like somebody could be really accepting, but it's really like almost its own form of exposure work, where over time the DA incrementally exposes themselves to somebody who they think is really accepting. And if that person also is really accepting, then they start to make positive emotional associations like, okay, I can be, more open. I can show myself more. I still am loved or accepted. And then over time, they like end in that place. But, it would be a lot shorter if they also did the internal work and they actually just showed up to be more accepting of themselves in front of people and take that sort of stress off. But I have heard, just for anybody listening, I've heard time and time again from clients, the same thing. Like, oh yeah, once I fully felt accepted or fully let somebody in and let my guard down and wasn't like shaming myself in front of that person and felt like they accepted my like creature comfort habits, like, eating too much junk food or binge watching television too much or video games or, those types of habits you'll see with DAs. Once they're like, oh, I started just being myself around the person more when spending extended periods of time with them. Same thing every time. They'd be like, oh, then I was comfortable. Then I was like able to actually feel like that was me truly being myself and being accepted for who I am. So I think that's such a background piece of friction that's there. And I think you put that really well, really, really well.
And yeah, to flip it to you, is there anything fearful-avoidant specific that you were like once really scared about where you're like, oh geez, like, I don't know if I want to move in with someone? Was there any specific fears that you had about moving in with someone?
Yeah, I was always scared when I was fearful avoidant of like the big steps. So I would find that I did really well in the dating stage of relationships. Like when it was just dating and there was no commitment yet or things weren't that serious, I could like show up and like be kind of like what was the best version of myself up until that point. So I would be like showing up with like my, I would be like present and caring and all these like nice things, but I didn't have all my fears coming up yet. So I wasn't doing any push pull. And then over time, when there would be a big commitment, like, oh, we're going to commit to a relationship or we're going to commit to living together, I would always panic. And I would panic and I would become honestly extremely ambivalent. That was like, truly, that was a reaction that actually showed up, not just in my romantic relationships, even in like workplace commitments, just a lot of places of life when I would commit to things, even like jobs that I would take earlier on when I was like still going through school, all that kind of stuff. I would, right at the tipping point of making a commitment, I would be like, it's going to be the wrong decision. Something bad's going to happen. Why am I doing this? And I would go back and forth in my head and start like sabotaging all the reasons why it can't work and it shouldn't work and I shouldn't do this. And I would become chaotic in the relationship at that point. So I would end up like being very push-pull oriented. And underneath, I think what was happening is, as a fearful avoidant, I just always believed deep down that relationships end badly. I thought that like somebody betrays the other person, somebody abandons the other person, there's going to be pain. So the more that I cared and the more serious things got, the more it was always like a bittersweet feeling where it would be like, wow, it feels so nice to feel these feelings, but like it's also so sad because it just means that we're going to be more heartbroken eventually. And I would always like feel like that in the background because it was a subconscious belief pattern for me. So it wasn't even like I was like thinking it and creating that. It was like this pre-existing idea because I believe that from past relationships and how I saw my parents, growing up or things like that. So I would constantly be like, oh, this is going to be chaos. So when you make more serious commitments, you're just hurting yourself more and more in the process. And so honestly, every time before I would go to live with somebody, there was like 3 times kind of. Each time I would get like nervous. And the last time was with my now husband and we moved in together. Like he asked me to move in pretty early, like after like a year. And I was already like largely secure at that point. I did a lot of like deep inner work, but not work around relationships as much, like vulnerability work and expressing my needs and like having better boundaries. Like I had done a little work there for sure, but not enough compared to like the deep internal work that I had done on just like my own stuff. And so what I found is that when we got into that space, even then I still was like, I said yes. And then I was like, days leading up, I was like panicking inside. Like, am I making the right decision? Is this right? Is it too early? Is this just going to like, cause more chaos? And, it ultimately like kind of put us in a power struggle stage a little quicker, but also because we both really showed up to do the work, that ended up being a blessing. Like it ended up being something that, like we progressed the relationship through stages more quickly, but it was good for us because we both showed up to like get out of the power struggle stage and keep moving on. So yeah, I would say, for me as a fearful avoidant at the time, that was a big theme. And a lot of it isn't about the other person, right? Just like with the dismissive avoidant, it's never about the other person. It's about like your fears that you are carrying from pre-existing events that you like project onto the person. Yeah. And that's the real source of the fear.
Yeah, I love all that. One last thing that popped in my head too that was really scary was in childhood in my home, I witnessed a lot of my mom sort of like kind of like ragging on my dad for a lot of stuff, like, oh, why are you taking a nap, in the middle of the day, or, oh, you should be doing yard work now, or, he would finish work early sometimes. And to him, he's like, okay, I finished my work day early, so the rest of my day is free, But she was like, no, you should be doing something like productive all the time. So I think growing up, I thought if I move in with someone, that's the end of sort of like independent Mike. Like, I'm going to be put to work all the time. I'm going to be shamed for wanting to take a nap. I'm going to be like having somebody constantly like sort of like belittling me and like telling me what I should be doing and what I'm doing wrong. So just everything about it seemed like it would be like not a fun experience, but really it couldn't be further from the truth because people are not as, I'm not ripping on my mom. My mom's amazing, but in general, the people that I've lived with are pretty cool with like, oh, okay, this person likes to take a nap once in a while. So, that's their nap time. Or this person likes to, play video games for a couple hours a day. That's their thing or whatever. So people are a little more, I think, understanding than I thought they would be. And I know we've talked about this in the past where we think like the DA thinks like their behaviors and their habits are like shameful or like, not normal. But if someone loves you and you're just doing what brings you happiness, they're generally not going to like try to like make you upset and like try to stop whatever is the source of your happiness. Of course, if it spills over to like you not giving them attention or you not taking care of the duties around the house, there's a problem and the conversation needs to be had. But in general, I just think if you live with someone, there's going to be some give and take. They're going to like to do things that they like to do and, fair play, let them do it. And there's going to be things that you like to do that, your partner should let you do as well. So, yeah, I just want to bring that up as well. I remember it was kind of like a childhood fear with moving in with someone.
It makes so much sense. And it's so interesting. Like, I feel like that's just a mirror point for everybody listening, which is like, we so easily and so frequently take our childhood experiences and just assume this is how everybody is. So this will be my adult experience with living with somebody. And, I did that in my example. Like I was like, oh, it's going to end in chaos. And I just assumed that. And so I just assumed every time I would make a serious commitment, oh my goodness, it's just going to end badly. So I would be in this push-pull of wanting more closeness with somebody and then being terrified of like what that actually meant long term. And we're just so quick to do that. So I just want to encourage everybody listening to take a moment and share and think about, when it comes to living with somebody or when it comes to something maybe that I'm struggling with now in a relationship, where am I at? What am I in a place right now where I'm assuming my childhood onto my adult experiences? Because that's how the subconscious works. That's how our conditioning works from our past events. So a good reference point for everybody to sort of dig into. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to dive into talking a little bit more about what happens if a fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant cheats? What's going on here? Why does this even take place? A great question from Gabby Vargas. We'll be right back. I just wanted to pop in here and let you know we are doing a 7-day free trial to the All Access Membership Pass at PDS, which means you get access to literally everything inside of the school. And this includes the 4 live webinars I do with our students every single week. And on top of that, you get access to all of our different courses. We have over 55 different courses on relationships, communication, boundaries, emotional mastery, guilt and shame, learning your needs, so many different facets that are really important to master our lives and feel really good about our lives going forward. And last but not least, there's a daily community event. We have trained facilitators and coaches who are in there doing that work, showing up to support you on your journey every single day. Please join me on the other side. Come check it out. See if it's a fit for you. I'd love to see you there. Go ahead and sign up by clicking the link in the description box below. Welcome back. So we're going to talk a little bit about what goes through the mind of dismissive avoidance or fearful avoidance when they cheat, and why do they do it or think of doing it? So we're going to do a deep dive into this question. And I think that there's some really important layers here to go through. I just want to be mindful that if you're listening to this and you're like, when they cheat, it doesn't mean that every fearful avoidant cheats. If you're in a relationship right now with a fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant, every dismissive avoidant doesn't cheat. Every fearful avoidant doesn't cheat. But this person's asking when they do. So don't be worrying if you're more anxiously attached and you heard that, or if you're fearful avoidant and you heard that. But what we're going to do is unpack the details of who, or when this happens, like what is actually going through their internal perspective. And just before we dive in with Mike, if you are listening to us on iTunes or Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts, you can check us out on YouTube as well. For the full video version of this episode. Or if you are watching on YouTube and you want company when you're driving to work, or you want to listen back to these, you can always check us out anywhere that you listen to podcasts. So Mike, I will hand it over to you if you want to touch on a little bit about what goes through the mind of an avoidant if they are cheating, and what is your perspective on this?
Yeah, so like I'll answer from my perspective of, when I was at my most unhealed, and reasons why I would have considered cheating and maybe had done some emotional cheating in the past. So I will say for myself too, like I would never like go out and seek out like an extra relationship affair. That takes a lot of energy and effort. So I think a lot of DAs don't go out there and they're like, I'm going to try to like meet someone and, take them out secretly and do all this secret stuff. I believe an avoidance a little more, don't want to put in like the big effort for that kind of thing. However, I think if someone does show them attention, that like plugs a lot of their insecurities and their negative thoughts about themselves. If they're seeing somebody who's actually liking them and thinking like, wow, like I want to be with you, that feels pretty damn good, because I wasn't used to giving that to myself. I didn't think much of myself. I wasn't happy with who I was as a person. So if somebody's showing me attention or somebody's showing me like flirting with me, a person of the opposite sex, that would make me feel like, wow, like I must be good enough. Like I must be not broken. I must be someone, special. That was one of the main things actually I remember thinking. If someone made me feel special, I would be like really like attracted to them. And I'd be like, wow, I want to be around that more. So, sadly, I don't condone cheating whatsoever, but if you don't know how to make yourself feel special and somebody external to you does, and maybe, you've been in a relationship for a while and you're, sometimes early days, your partner's like, wow, you're awesome. They think you're amazing and they admire you and tell you all the awesome stuff about you. But then like a lot of relationships after like a year, 2 years, 3 years, there might not be as much as that sort of like, where you're in awe of your partner or telling them like all the things that you like about them, which is important. We should be doing that anyway. So it's almost like, you haven't heard that in a while and you don't feel as special with your current partner. Like you feel okay and things are fine. But if someone comes along and shows that like, wow, you're really awesome, or like, wow, you're really different, really special, then there would be like the pull and the thought of like, wow, I want to be around this person because they think I'm great. So that's sort of one of the reasons why like an avoidant would, the thought process that goes around it and why they might do things that they shouldn't be doing. And it's because it, is making them feel good when otherwise they're not feeling that great about themselves. So
you touched on something that was like such an important point. Like this is the reason. So I would see in my practice all the time, the reason people cheat. So I would always kind of break it down like this, like 90-10 split. And I really didn't see exceptions outside of this. So our 10% is people cheat because they actually have pre-existing issues. So like, maybe more pathological, but for example, somebody has sex addiction and usually that may intertwine with somebody having narcissistic personality disorder. There's these deep, pre-existing conditions where, hey, somebody like, a narcissist, for example, they don't know how to empathize very well with people. They can sympathize sometimes, but empathy is difficult. They constantly need admiration and attention and they're grandiose. And so if you put those things together, well, you're going to see them more likely to fall into the category where they're constantly seeking out that kind of stimulation. So, 10% of people have these pre-existing conditions. Sure, antisocial personality disorder, histrionic, you'd see those kinds of things. 90% of people cheat because they're in relationships where there's unmet needs. And the subconscious mind is a needs meeting machine. So like to your point, when there's this need where you don't know how to make yourself feel special, and then maybe you flirt with the idea in your mind of like, oh, this person's making me feel special. I'm out of that like honeymoon stage with my current partner. And this person's making me feel special over here. And so, I want to go be around that person. We feel attracted to that person. Well, this is pretty common for everybody because your subconscious mind is attracted to whatever is going to get its needs met. And that doesn't have to always be physical attraction. That can be that you're attracted to somebody as a friend or something like that, that you just want to spend time around that person because they encourage you or whatever it might be. But that's obviously very likely to sow the seeds of something more romantic or physical if there are the other physical components to that relationship dynamic. So you'll see these points where it's like, okay, no wonder that things tend to fall into those kinds of categories. And it's human, but I also think it's so important for people to recognize that's what's happening, because what I would spend a lot of time doing with people in my practice is getting people to sit down who had cheated or who were thinking of cheating and who came to like, share that in coaching or counseling. And they would say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, or I'm feeling all these feelings for somebody outside of my romantic relationship. And time again, I would get them to sit down and I would be like, what needs does this person meet? Like the person you're thinking of cheating on or cheating with, and that person that you're like fantasizing about or romanticizing in your mind, like in those fantasies, what are those needs? And I would see the same things all like over and over again. The person that they were fantasizing about makes them feel seen or heard or special or wanted or important or appreciated or acknowledged, or somebody they can do fun things together or has really similar interests. And it would just so happen that every time those things were not getting met in their current relationship. And so what I would get them to do is go, okay, let's sit down here. Let's actually extract those specific needs that are not being met. And let's start having conversations in your marriage or in your partnership and say, hey, I need more of these things. Let's work on them. And over time, if the other person was willing to do the work with them, the infatuation with somebody outside of the relationship would go away, almost in direct proportion to when this person was suddenly getting those needs met in their relationship of origin. And so you would see that being that underlying factor. And that's like what it boils down to. So I love that you said that and shared that, because it's like, I feel like that's so relatable to people, even if it's just flirting with the idea of something else. It's like, oh, okay, well, it makes sense because if you have that need that's being met from somebody and it's not met in your relationship, well, your subconscious mind is wired to want to move in the direction of a need that it gets met.
Totally, 100%. And to add to DAs, feel like they can't ask their partner for their needs to be met. So it's almost like this other person or this other fantasy seems like the most direct and like easy way as a solution, but it's not a solution whatsoever. And it leads to a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. And it's not good for anyone. So the DA's work is you have to start to realize it's okay to ask for a need to be met. If you're feeling a little bit undesired, if you're feeling a little bit like you're not special, talk to your partner about it. Let them know. They would have no idea. Like if you don't say anything, they probably think, okay, everything's okay. Like, the squeaky wheel gets oiled. So you have to say something if you're feeling these things. And, a good partnership works on things together. So like we said, if you don't know the issue, then there can be no solutions. There could be no, hey, let's work on this. Let's figure it out why you feel this way and how we can, change that. So just want to mention to the DAs out there, like, it's okay. It's not weak. Like you have the right. I know in childhood, you probably didn't get a lot of these needs met when you tried to ask for a need to be met. It wasn't met with soothing or, how you wanted it to be. But in adult life, in relationships, your partner generally will want to meet your needs because they want their needs met as well. Like it's a good sort of interdependence that should be happening. So for the DAs, I know it's tough, but just start small. If you feel something, feel a certain way, or you feel a draw to someone outside of you, find out what the need is, and then have that conversation with your partner so you can start to sort of work on the solution together. So
I love that. And I think sometimes DAs are like, oh, well, that's vulnerable, just like you're saying. But the reality is that by doing that, you benefit yourself. Exactly the things that relationships need to heal, each person needs in order to heal themselves individually. So like for a dismissive avoidant, for them to be like, oh, I'm going to work on expressing my needs, they might be like, what if I don't want to put in that effort? Well, it's not just effort for the relationship, it's effort for you as a human being to work through that, to undo the pattern of thinking that like your needs are always going to be neglected and to assume that onto everything and to not want to be vulnerable. Like that's tremendously healing because we are wired, whether we like it or not, for attachment, as much as we are wired for that authenticity or individuation. So yeah, I love that you said that. I think that's such a powerful share and it's the way out. And to your point, going into the fearful avoidance side of things, like fearful avoidance, like same dynamic. Like you made such an amazing point, which is that the association is that they're both not communicating their needs. So what I would see all the time and similar to you, like if there were times where I like flirted with the idea of acting outside of the relationship, it was always when I was feeling like needs were not met and I was hurting and I was like feeling like needs were really not met. And so your mind starts drifting into like fantasizing about other situations or people or contexts because that's the way, something that's like an actual principle is if your subconscious mind can't get its needs met in the present, it'll actually break into fantasies of the future or memories of the past as a way to try to get closer to those needs being met. And so, as a fearful avoidant, you'll see the same exact patterns. If needs are not being met, the context that's likely to create it is that the fearful avoidant has unmet needs, doesn't know how to communicate those needs because, again, it's like an unknown. Like you don't even know that you're not communicating your needs because you don't even realize that like you have needs in a relationship and what they are. And so then when you're starving for them and then somebody else comes along and seems to represent those needs, and for fearful avoidance, the big ones you'd see are almost always the things they struggle with themselves. So things like somebody makes you feel really seen or somebody makes you feel really known or understood or, important, the way that fearful avoidants are often prioritizing other people. It's in those types of situations that their mind's like, whoa, this is like, pulling me in this direction. And so then it's like full steam ahead towards that person or situation, whether that's cheating or just thinking about the idea of cheating. And then that's going to be what lays the groundwork. Now, I want to be really clear to anybody listening. This is absolutely not me saying that it's the other person's fault if somebody ever does cheat. It's not at all. It's actually the person's responsibility as the fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant, if you want to be in a healthy, committed relationship, I do believe it's a really important responsibility to learn to know what your needs are, learn to communicate, learn to have those conversations so that it acts as like an emotional immunity to those things happening. You can start registering when certain needs aren't met. And you can know those like points in the relationship where if you're with somebody for the long term, after 5 years, 10 years, you start knowing like, these are always the things that we have to kind of work on more consciously in the relationship. And so you can carve out time for those things. You can have, check-ins around those things. Are these needs being met? I know for myself and my husband, we both can get super busy and focused, and then we can easily have like 1 or 2 days that go by where we were like busy and focused and doing things, and we weren't present enough with each other. And so in order to prevent those things, we have like a little morning and evening routine together where we check in the morning and we have a coffee together, or before bed, we have like an actual time where we're like, what was the favorite part of your day? And we share and we talk about things, and we like have our phones away and we're just really present. So even if there's like all the distractions and busyness of the outside world, we have that dedicated time. And we've learned that about ourselves because I throw myself headfirst into all these things, and so does he. And so, we can easily fall into that trap. But hey, that's something meaningful to us. So we make the effort to do that in advance. And like there's such solvable small solutions to these things if you have the emotional awareness and literacy to like investigate what your themes and patterns are in a relationship dynamic and just have like, an easy routine around it. So, yeah, it's so funny because I feel like there's so much stuff on the internet about cheating and like so little actual tangible information about how do you prevent it? How do you, fix or solve for it? And I just think that these are such important conversations to be having.
Yeah, I love that. I love the ideas of the routines as well, because you're adding in something that that means a lot to you and that that you need from your partner. So instead of just leaving it to chance, like, oh, I hope my partner asks me about my day today, or I hope my partner makes me feel seen today, have a routine that makes you feel seen, that makes you feel heard, makes you feel understood. And then, that's just amazing. Like there's no sort of leaving it on autopilot, it's like, yeah, it's amazing. I love that you guys do that.
Thanks.
Is that a non-negotiable? Is there days where it's like, oh, I don't feel like sharing today? Or is it like, no, we're sharing?
For sure, because like we're human. I always want to make room for like humanness. So if he were to ever come to me or be like, oh, I really don't want to do it today or something, I would like always make room or space. But that's like, it just seems to be something we always do and that we naturally show up for. Like, I don't know if there's been a time. Some days it's like a little shorter than others where we have like a little less to share, but there's often times where, for example, like he, works during the day and sometimes I'll have to work into the evening because I'll be doing like a certification training or, a webinar in the evenings on Thursdays. And so then I'll finish work late and then, I'm like, whoa, it's been such a busy day. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, we kind of like missed the boat on each other all day. And that's when we started doing that. It was because we had like a couple days during the week where we would see that. And I would just feel this like disconnect and I would talk to him about it and he would be like, yeah, I feel that too. And so we're like, okay, how do we prevent that? Well, we just have like these kind of non-negotiables where we like have a coffee break in the morning, no matter what, for like 10, 15 minutes. And we have this little thing in the evening. And then it just became like patterned into the relationship. And it's just something that we like naturally always make sure we do.
I love that.
Yeah. We're lucky because we both work from home.
Rituals that yeah, for sure. No, I was just going to say, it's so great to create those rituals. So, sit down with your partner and see what is a ritual you can do daily that both of you like look forward to. And it just brings you together. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And it's always going to be around, like, as you are in a relationship for a long time, you'll start to notice I don't want to say cracks because they're not cracks, but I want to be like really honest and transparent about the fact that like 80% of the time, you're going to be like, everything's this perfect fit. It's great. And 20% of the time or 10% of the time, you're going to have stuff where it's like, we can easily fall into these like kind of maladaptive patterns together. And if you leave them, they are going to become big maladaptive patterns and they're going to build on themselves. But if you're just aware of them, like, hey, we naturally fall into getting too busy or we naturally fall into forgetting ABC, like whatever it might be, then all you have to do is be like, okay, so we know this about our personalities together, that like this can be a place that we, don't pay enough attention to sometimes. So then just putting that like conscious intention around that, knowing that it just prevents like arguments or discomfort or like, frustration, because it's just not a frustration in the relationship dynamic, despite it being an area where like there may be little things that don't naturally flow with this big portion over here. So I not to just keep spieling about this because we have to take a break in a second, but I just think it's such an important thing that's like that emotional immunity to falling into painful patterns that, of course, in their extremes or long-term can turn out to be why people cheat. And if somebody's ever been cheated on in a situation, again, it's not that person's fault. It's the responsibility of the person to communicate their needs. But ideally, we're like setting those types of standards in our relationships long-term.
Very well said.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back to dive into the topic of dismissive avoidance and pornography. What does this mean? What is this all about? Be right back. So the summer is coming to a close, and now it's time to welcome in probably our much busier season. And if you're anything like me, the last place you probably want to be spending time is figuring out what to eat for dinner and standing in long grocery store lines. So you can make life easier with HelloFresh, which is America's #1 meal kit. With fresh ingredients and simple recipe cards delivered straight to your door, HelloFresh takes care of all of your meal planning, shopping, and meal prep. And I really can't express how much time HelloFresh has actually saved me each and every week. What I love most is the variety. So whether you're looking for fit and wholesome or quick and easy, vegetarian, or even family-friendly options, their ever-changing recipes keep food exciting when it comes to dinner and never leave me feeling like I'm making the same meals and just eating the same food over and over again. So if you're ready to save time and make cooking much more enjoyable for you and your loved ones, you can go for free breakfast for life at hellofresh.com/free-Thais. That's THAIS. And you'll get one free breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life just by going to hellofresh.com/free-Thais, THAIS. And now for a word from our sponsors. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that actually helps you find quality candidates fast. So you can ditch the busy work. And you can use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging, which allows you to then connect with candidates much faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And one of the things I love about Indeed is that it makes all hiring in one place easy because you literally have the perfect match of candidates there. In fact, Indeed is something that we use all the time for hiring candidates at the personal development school, and I would feel a little bit lost without it, to be perfectly honest. When I was looking to hire somebody, it was originally slow and overwhelming until I decided to just go straight to Indeed, and that's when everything became a lot more simple. And it's still something that we use and will continue to use all the time. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences as well, so the more you use Indeed, the better it actually gets. So you can join 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of the show will actually get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Thais. Just go to Indeed.com/Thais right now, and you can support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this particular podcast. Again, that's Indeed.com/Thais. Terms and conditions may apply. Need to hire, you need Indeed. Welcome back. Let's dive in here. So here's the question that we have for today. So my DA boyfriend is using porn a lot. I found a lot of videos and sites he has been visiting on our shared laptop's history. I also see that our sex life has taken a big back step. This is hurtful and feels like cheating. So I think this is such a powerful topic because this is something I would hear a lot when I was running my practice, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this first, Mike.
Yeah, for sure. I understand that this would be super hurtful and that it would feel like cheating because you're feeling like, especially if the sex life has taken a bit of a dip, you're thinking, oh, is my partner choosing this porn over me? Like, of course, that would be super, super upsetting. But just to share the DA's sort of perspective on this, I believe is they use porn as like escapism. So this is a time where instead of like, there's a lot of maybe problems at work going on or a lot of problems in whatever area of life going on. And there's an opportunity to sort of step into like a fantasy world where there's like no worries and no, expectations. And it's just pure like enjoying themselves and pure pleasure. So yeah, with the escapism piece, like a lot of people have different things that they do. Some people might, if they're stressed, do like shopping. They have shopping addictions. If they're stressed, they might overeat. There's so many different things. But I think a lot of times DAs have depression issues as well. It's definitely not across the board, but sometimes we see where DAs can be a little more prone to depression. And I think when that happens, there's like a dopamine imbalance. And porn kind of really like shoots up the dopamine levels and gets, more of a state of excitement. Because when you're feeling depressed, feeling low, feeling kind of sluggish and tired, this is a way you can sort of feel like, energized and feel, pleasure at least for however long you're watching porn for. But then after, it's sort of like the pendulum, goes up and then swings back to like feeling low and not good about yourself. So it is damaging on both sides. I don't think porn is a good thing at all. Obviously, anything, in moderation is probably not too bad. But I think porn in general can cause a lot of issues in relationships. And just to go back to that dopamine thing, if you're sort of watching porn regularly, your baseline dopamine levels are going to be like, you're going to need more and more exciting things to sort of get excited and feel aroused. So that if you're watching porn so much, by the time you're going to have sex or have intimacy with your partner, you're not feeling as like excited, you're not feeling as aroused. So it actually like really messes with your levels where you actually are not enjoying or wanting sex with your partner as much. So yeah, just those are just some thoughts that I had. Escapism. So instead of going towards the problems, like fixing whatever issues going on at work, fixing whatever issues happening, in a relationship, this is sort of, I think, an avoidance way of just naturally feeling good. They're feeling bad for so long. This is like 30 minutes they can actually feel good. So when you mentioned about cheating, it feels like cheating. I totally understand it feels like cheating, but I just really don't think it's them consciously choosing that over you. I think it's them not knowing how to make themselves feel better. They're disconnected with their body. They don't know exactly like, meditation can help, being out in nature. Like there's so many different things, reprogramming core wounds. Like there's so many different things you can do to feel better about your life situation. But this is just a very quick and easy way to sort of feel better temporarily. So those are just sort of some thoughts.
Those are some fantastic shares. Yeah, those are amazing. And I think all really, really valid points. There's a couple things too that kind of leapfrog off of that are also really interesting. When we were talking about like cheating and needs earlier, it can be so hard. And I want to circle back to the part of this where it's like, what do you do? Like, you should have a conversation with your partner and all that kind of stuff. But just the pure explanation of it, to take what you said and even just like give it extra examples. When you look at dismissive avoidance, so I had a big portion actually for a while in my practice, men and women. I say big portion, but it'd probably be like 2 out of every segment of clients I was working with. So let's say I was working with like 40 people, maybe 2 of the clients on a regular basis would actually bring up at some point, hey, I'm really struggling with almost what feels like an addiction to porn. And when I unpacked that with people, it was interesting because I did see that they trended towards being dismissive avoidant. And I would say the vast majority actually who would report things like not using porn or, but actually feeling like they had like too much of an addictive habit or pattern. And my conclusion through having a lot of conversations with these individuals really openly and transparently, to their credit, like really being open and vulnerable and doing the work, which I thought was so impressive, was that it was so interesting. It was like dismissive avoidance get these needs met, just like we were talking about with cheating, right? Like there's these very specific needs being super met from porn, like whether it be novelty or exploration or connection. or, pleasure, or, that can kind of go hand in hand with, like you said, escapism, but all in a way that don't make them have to be vulnerable. And so there's this sense of like control in there, right? In like not that dismissive avoidance particularly tend to be controlling people, hardly ever, but generally you'd see that there's a sense of like safety and like I'm controlling the experience around porn. So like safety and control and comfort in a way, because it's from the comfort of your own home and you're not having to be open or vulnerable or expose yourself. And one thing that's very well known about dismissive avoidance is when they can't get their needs met in reality, they often escape to fantasy. And dismissive avoidance have generally a lot of patterns of escapism, whether it be through porn, through like watching tons of movies and just loving movies and art and creativity, whether it be through the fantasy world in their mind where they have these really rich fantasy worlds. So it all lines up as sort of these common themes. And there's a lot of parallels. It's, hey, if you are not getting your needs met in everyday life, and especially around things like connection or novelty, because you're, trying to stay in your comfort zone, well, porn is the way to get all of these needs met at once without ever having to leave the safety of your own home, expose yourself to your own feeling of vulnerability, open up too much, co-regulate too often with other people when we don't know how. And so, there tends to be this output of that happening. And to me, it really just boils down to these same fundamental principles across the board. If you can't get your needs met in healthier forms because you have blocked at the subconscious level where you feel like it's unsafe to be vulnerable or to open up, or it's hard for you to be present sometimes because you're in a dysregulated space, well, your mind's going to find a way to get its needs met because that's how our mind works. And so it just boils right back down to those same things. And what I would get avoidance to do who are actually struggling with this, kind of complicated, but I would get them to first write out all the needs that porn was meeting. So let's say it was connection in a safe way. Let's say it was novelty. Let's say it was control, pleasure, or escapism. And then I would get them to come up with healthier, updated strategies for pleasure, for a healthy sense of self-control, like having better boundaries or communicating more, through having more safety and comfort, through practicing nervous system regulation, through meeting their needs for connection, through practicing exposure work on being more vulnerable slowly but surely over time. And what was so interesting is that as they learned to get these needs in healthier ways, we would kind of enter into phase 2, which was to write out all the costs, all the negatives about porn, and then listen back to them, write them down or read them back or record them down and listen back for 21 days, because that's how we start to recondition our subconscious patterns. And then they would start seeing the negatives of porn and feeling about it instead of seeing it as a one-sided positive thing that their subconscious was viewing it as, at least in a sense. And then also find updated ways to get their needs met. And it would actually shift completely those conditions or that patterning around pornography. And over time, they would actually feel like more of a resistance to it, feel like, oh, wow, porn was almost a symptom for me of all the things I was actually starving for over here and didn't have better access to because I was afraid of these things. And then by overcoming their fears and practicing healthier needs and then looking at the downsides of porn, we rebalance the perception and then get the needs met in different ways. And so that's where you'd see that needle really be able to move. So that was a very long explanation, but I'd love for you, if you want to share just for a second too, an example of what this person in the situation could do with their dismissive avoidant partner. Like, should they have a conversation? Like, let's take it back to that part of the conversation too.
Answer on both sides what I think needs to happen. First of all, I'll answer on the partner side who's using the porn a lot. So number one, you covered a lot of it obviously right there. And I love the idea of having a better strategy on hand. No pun intended. Because if you don't and you're stressed out, you're just going to go for that same thing that you always went to in the past, even though it's destructive, even though you don't feel good after, even though your partner gets really upset. Like, if you don't have any sort of strategies available, like, you're just going to do that over and over. So coming up with strategies beforehand, knowing that what's going to make you feel better or what it is that you need, that's just super, super important. For the person too, like, I know for myself, I would use it in the past when I was stressed out. That was my go-to stress thing. So you have to look at what are these stressors in your life that are causing you stress all the time. Like, you have to deal with stress. The body can only handle stress for like a certain amount of time before it starts to break down and, bad health things happen, right? So if you notice you have a lot of stress in your life, tackle that, find out what is it. Do you need to, get a different job? Are you in a job that you don't like and it's causing you to feel stressed? Like, you have to look at the reasons of why you're stressed, because when you eliminate that stress, you're not just going to go towards these sort of autopilot things that are usually not great for you. And then number two, I just find you have to kind of cut out watching porn for a good amount of time. The beautiful thing about the body is once we do sort of stop doing things, it goes back to baseline. So once you sort of get that dopamine back to baseline, then sexual encounters with your partner is way more exciting. And, the foreplay is exciting and doing the actual act is exciting. And hanging out after is really nice. If you're in that habit of using porn and it's just, you need something really hyper exciting every time you're with your partner, it's just not gonna work. So I believe this person needs to cut it out for a while and then sort of rediscover, the excitement and the passion that they probably had in their relationship before the porn was being used quite a bit.
I love that. Like a dopamine reset.
So important. And I go not even for porn, even internet. If you're using a lot of internet and there's links between anxiety and using the internet too much. So this is another thing. If you're using internet too much and binging because you're stressed out, this is going to have a cost to it, right? So we need to sort of fast on all sorts of technology and these types of things. The last thing I'll say for the partner is let your partner know that how it's affecting you and how it's hurting you. And it feels like they're choosing porn over being with you. So you're feeling undesired, you're feeling like you're, don't want to be with them. So just let them know. Don't shame them. Obviously we know shaming doesn't do anything and kind of makes the person feel terrible. And then you have two people that feel awful, but just let them know see if you can work with them. What is it that you feel the need that you have to go to that? Are there other things that we can do to feel better, to sort of better strategies instead of using porn? Because I would rather you talk to me and let me know sort of what's happening, why you're stressed or why you feel you need to use that, than you having to do that behind the back. So let's have a conversation about it. And when it's approached without any shame or what you're doing is terrible and this is awful, then I believe the person will be a little more open to share, yeah, I know this is not good, but I just, when I feel this way, this is the only thing that I know what I should be doing. And then you can have a conversation from that point. So just try to talk to the person without shame or blame and sort of see what resolution you can come to together. So
I love that. I think that's so powerful. I love that you said go to the root of the actual stress too, find out what's stressing you in your life and work through that. If it's a job situation,
sure.
I just think that can't be said enough. So I love that. I love the dopamine sort of detox reset sort of idea too. And then, a way you could sort of script it out essentially is you could say to your partner, you could say, look, obviously we share a computer and I was looking through the history the other day to find something of mine and this came up and for me, connection is so important in the relationship, including in the sexual and intimacy area of life. And, I've noticed that it seems like we're not connecting there as much. And so I kind of took this to heart. And what I would love is for us to really work on putting more effort and intention to this area. And I want us to be able to talk about is this a problem? Is this something that's happening too often? And I'm not here to judge you at all. I'm here to support you and to better understand what's going on. And I also vulnerably just want to tell you it hurt me a little bit to see that and that affects me. And I'd like for us to be able to talk through towards a better solution. And I think that that's a great way to sort of kick off that conversation and sort of see the needle hopefully move forward. And of course, how your partner responds is going to tell you a lot about what happens next, right? If you have somebody who just shuts down in all areas, refuses to have conversations about important things, that's obviously telling you a lot. But if you have somebody it's hard and it's awkward at first, but is willing to do the work. I mean, that's what relationships are. We have those hard conversations sometimes and they're awkward until they're normal because we've had them enough and we break through problems by doing that. So amazing, amazing stuff. So we're going to jump off in just a second here, but I just want to encourage you, if you are listening, you can check out Mike on social media. You can follow Mike. We'll put his social media handles down below. And If you are interested as well, you can check out any of the courses we have at the Personal Development School. We have a 7-day free trial that's going on right now, so I will put the link to that in the show notes. And thank you so much for anybody listening and stopping by. I hope you're enjoying this podcast, and please feel free to post on Can This Be Fixed on Reddit, or throw your questions in our YouTube comments anytime. And we have somebody who sort of sifts through them and sends them over, and does an amazing job of all that good stuff. So thank you, Mike, for being here, for being a fantastic co-host as always. And I'll see you guys next week. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Share it with friends and family who are on their journey of personal development and growth. And thank you for listening. Next week, we'll be back with more insights to guide you on your journey. And until then, keep practicing our tools and strategies to change your subconscious mind and apply some of the powerful learnings from this podcast so that you experience real life transformation.